Ready to get the inside scoop on equity funding? Tune into TDJ Equity Funding Insiders Podcast for an in-depth look at what it takes to access financial capital and maximize your investments. Hear from experienced professionals, including bankers, underwriters, loan officers, and industry experts as they share their unfiltered stories and valuable lessons on securing funds.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our podcast today, TDJ Equity Funded Insiders. So we are actually having a special guest for you all today. This guest is actually dealing with the human resource services that actually affect you on getting funding. A lot of companies don't think it does, but it do. And so we have a guest that's coming in to show how having your business compliance and having your human resource services for us, your job descriptions, your employees, and everything lined out, how it affects your bottom line, which is revenue. So we're going to have a discussion about that today, and we want you all to sit tight and listen to what inside information he has for us. Let's welcome our guest. It's Mr. John Beaty from Texas, and he's here to discuss his human resources services and how they work for us. Welcome, John.
Well, thanks, Jackie. I appreciate that. Man, it's a fully loaded question when people ask, like, what is HR, right? There's so much to unpack because essentially HR takes care of businesses, people, but it's literally everything and anything people-based. And the importance of HR gets overlooked a ton. People think of it as like a cost center versus a profit center. And that could be a huge difference in a business's profitability and their equity as far as a business is concerned as well. So kind of take it from the top. Lots of businesses have people, right? They have people that service and take care of their clients. So if you're not maximizing the potential of those folks, then you're suffering on your back end, whether it's revenue or it's bottom line. So from an HR perspective, it's not just where the benefits are or payroll comes from or where people go to complain. It's more the strategic outlook of how to put the people in the right places, service them, engage them, and help them develop in that role. By doing that, you're maximizing their potential. And basically, Business 101, happy, engaged employees produce more output. Exactly. That output usually leads to more revenue and other things along those financial terms. But how do you get to that spot? Right. Well, it all starts from the very beginning, writing the right job descriptions, as you just said. I worked at a company once where I went to go work there at a certain job description, and 6 months into that job, it changed.
Wow.
My engagement level went way down. So my output went way down. Right. I was actively disengaged in that job because I wasn't doing what I was hired to do, what I wanted to do. And so you have a lot of folks like that. And what does that lead to? It leads to turnover. And turnover is costly. To acquire a new associate, it's costly enough. But to lose an associate, it's even more. Because you take all that time, that effort to hire that person on, train them, develop them, get them up to speed. And after a year, if you let them go, you lost everything that you put into there. So
exactly,
it's just like having a client. It's harder to obtain a client than it is to retain. So you want to work on working on that retention for the employees. And so top talent is also an issue too, right? Okay. So you have your job descriptions, you get those solid down. Then you look at how do we get the best of the best? Well, you're going to have a great compensation plan. You got to have some sort of benefit offering, and not just medical, but maybe an employee assistance program. You have dental vision, the benefits, of course, long-term, short-term disability, good PTO policies. Maybe you have, a community online program where you can get cooking classes and all that, because people are looking at things differently now. And the last part is a culture. Okay. You got to have a great culture. Right. So that's what people are looking for. Back in the day, people worked and accomplished things to be satisfied with their job, right? The job is what satisfaction came from. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, that's changed.
Yeah, it has.
People are working for their lives versus people working their job as their life.
Exactly.
And so considering all those things, you got to have things in place. So the next thing is you find the top talent. You hire the top talent. Now we're looking at, okay, what do we do now? Well, let's look at the culture and let's train these folks. Mm-hmm. So starting off at least a basic training program from a compliance standpoint, because that's a big deal. A lot of people don't really pay attention to compliance. Can not only save the company money and save them the risk factor of litigation. Even like a place in Texas where you have a right to fire and hire, but it's a heavily litigated state.
Right.
So even if you fire somebody, there could be some consequences to that if you didn't do it right.
All right.
So making sure compliance training is done from like workplace harassment, sexual harassment, workplace violence, et cetera, getting those all taken care of. But the next step is building a core structure that helps engage and develop people, whether it's developing into your culture, because we want to have a culture by design, not by default.
Exactly.
Which most companies don't realize that they have a culture by default.
That's right.
So you got to work on that. Your values equal the bottom line to what that culture means. And they can't be aspirational values. You got to live it. You got to live it from the top to the bottom. And you see a lot of companies like, hey, we have integrity. We want to do the best for our people, et cetera, et cetera. But when it gets down to that middle management, you see those things breaking apart.
Mm-hmm. And that costs.
It costs a lot. It costs turnover. People leave jobs because of their management, really, not because of the company. Some do, but
I agree.
Most people leave because their boss, they just can't work with.
Right.
It's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to everybody else. A lot of people on this podcast are listening. So you get them trained. You're developing their skill sets. Then you got to measure the performance. And not just for like the firing purposes, right? A lot of people are like, well, we want the performance indicators to make sure they're doing their job. Well, you also want the performance indicators to help people be motivated and engaged. People want to be told, I'm doing a good job. Mm-hmm. Or if I'm not doing a job, what can I do to do better? Mm-hmm. Most people want to succeed in life. I know I do. When my boss comes and tells me like, hey, you're doing a great job, I go, can you sit down and tell me what you think I'm doing good? And I'll go through that whole process. Mm-hmm. Because his thought process of doing good may not be mine.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, too, sometimes people just don't work out and you need to correct their actions.
Right.
And it's not one of those things where, yeah, for the past 6 months, he's been coming in late. And then you sit him down and go, hey, you just been coming in late. And you got to let you go. You got to tell people ahead of time, not only for them to be able to correct that, because, again, it costs a lot of money to acquire talent. Mm-hmm. But then that last piece, it's, hey, maybe this person can change and be one of my best associates if he just knows what he's doing wrong. Mm-hmm. But if you fire him and he doesn't know why, litigation could come up, right?
Right.
Maybe it's a woman that's pregnant and you fire her because she's been late. Well, she can turn around and say, hey, you fired me because I'm pregnant. I've seen it. It's happened a lot.
Right. So basically what you're saying, John, not knowing the compliance or knowing actually the HR process of how it really works for your company and how it can save your company, you can lose a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
And a whole lot. Now, let me say, I want to add to this, too, because as a loan broker, we deal with finding funding for business owners and real estate investors. And so just recently, we had one of our business clients who was able to get him $1.7 million. But what helped him to get that was the fact that it's a line of credit that he's getting. Now, let me show you how the line of credit works with what you're saying. In the process, they always ask them about their hiring. What are you going to use what you're going to use the funds for? And basically, he's using the funds for hiring along with some equipment. On the hiring part, they ask, what's your projections of what you think your numbers are going to be for as your payroll and your expenses and all of that. That is what they're asking to see what you look like. Now, people don't understand that on a line of credit, they do an annual evaluation of you every year. And so what they're looking for is to see how stable your company is. Because, they can cut that line of credit off. You can have it this year and they'll cut it off next year if you don't qualify based on how you're looking on paper and in your business. So it's important to take that human resource part seriously, especially when you talk about the turnover and the proper way of doing stuff. Because they ask you, do you have any jurisdictions or not jurisdictions, but if you have any cases coming up against you and stuff like that. And they ask that when they're asking for money. And that's what I'm saying. It's important. And that's why we wanted you to be a guest, because what you talk about is what I think a lot of people, and I definitely want you to talk about that don't realize, and those is some that do, because my guy, the 1.7 guy, he realized how important you are. He actually had our human resource services that worked with him, with his company. He had 50 employees. He got 50 employees. So that's understandable. So, but it's some companies that think, and they got 10, 12, they don't need that type of service. I can handle it. So if you would tell our listeners today how important, or even the story of how you've seen it by not having or utilizing the services that you have, what happens with that? How does that happen?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that you just said. So let's kind of hit each one by one question at a time.
Okay.
So from that compliance piece, so what we're talking about really is risk. So whether it's some of the things I talked about before, like workplace violence or things like that, someone has a lawsuit, those Department of Labor type of things. We call it EOC charges, right?
Gotcha.
Equal opportunity charges. So if someone comes back on that, one of those charges could put a business out. I mean, I've seen lawsuits anywhere from 1.2
And it
million.
would actually stop a loan too. I can tell you that as well.
Oh, absolutely.
It would stop it.
It's a huge risk. And, I deal with a lot of private equity groups, and when they see those, they're scared off, and that evaluation goes out the door.
Exactly.
So putting things in place to prevent that is huge. And part of that is the HR piece, right?
But even if it's put in place, if you can show you have it in place, even if you haven't went through it, because sometimes they ask them, let's see your policies, your procedures, this, and this. And that's where, if they're working with an HR, you all can provide that for them, where they could be, I think you call it compliance period. You can show we are in compliance. We have this set up to handle this type of situation. That's why it's good to have you too, right?
Yeah. Well, here's a funny statistic. 70% of all small businesses are out of compliance.
What's that percentage again?
70%.
Okay.
It's crazy. It's crazy high. The thing is, you got 50 states, and we live in a remote workforce place, right? Now, every single state has different compliances. Every single one of them.
Wow.
Like California is different than Texas. Texas is different than Massachusetts. Massachusetts is different than Wisconsin. All of them have something different, whether it's taking a compliance course or making sure payroll's done a certain way. I mean, there's so many different things, and that's where it becomes a huge hassle.
Well, let me say that. So that means if I have a friend that's in business in California and I'm in Texas, I'm going to call them about a personnel problem I have. And she's going to give me her best recommendation based on what she know in California. It could really be wrong, is what you're saying. A possibility.
So to be able to have the knowledge, let's say I'm a business owner. I'm not an HR expert. HR, sure, people have to go continue education courses to understand all these things.
That's good.
So I'm a small little business owner. I have 15, 20 employees. I have maybe in 3 different states.
Okay.
Well, I have to Google. Google's my best friend because that's all I have. But Google's not very efficient because there's so many different things out there. Having a professional that's certified in this that can help you limit the risk on this is the most important thing.
Right.
So regardless of the situation, it's, hey, don't take this lightly. For your point, from a financial piece, from somebody looking at me, what's my evaluation? But just to protect your assets, having somebody being able to be back there understanding the compliance is a huge factor. The other part that you were talking about was the talent piece and the evaluation. So you have a company that has high turnover. Well, that's, like I said, it's a costly problem. It's going to cost the company quite a bit to keep hiring and hiring and hiring and hiring. There's a lot of processes that require someone to hire into a business. As many people know, if they've ever hired people, it's kind of a pain. There's a lot of things to go through there, from putting out on the job boards. Maybe you have an ATS, an applicant tracking system, or maybe you have a recruiter person, and then getting them up and trained, because that person, when they first start, most likely are not being productive, right? They're in that startup phase, that honeymoon phase with the company where, I'm getting to know the company, getting to know my position. So it's usually, anywhere from 3 months to a year before they start being productive in the company, right? I know, being in the sales industry, if you're going to one industry to another, it takes time to learn everything. Most companies will understand a year ramp up time because it's so much. But imagine training that person for a year and then you're gone.
That's money. That has cost you, for sure.
And then you're looking at it from the outside of you as an investor in, well, these people can't just keep anybody.
Exactly.
What are there's a lot of money being wasted right here. And so there's a risk there too, because you want these people to be productive in your company.
Right.
Well, it's hard to be productive if you keep rolling people in and out of your company. So there's that matter. And then the last piece is going to, if they're not fully engaged, if you have a bad culture and you're not seeing the profitability that you want, you got to go back to what I said earlier. Ask yourself, if I'm not happy with my profitability to show on paper, then you got to go back to your people.
Right.
Why are my people not being as productive as they can?
Exactly.
Like I said, it's that culture by default, by design. You got to design a culture, and it's got to be top bottom. That's an HR person would come in. They would do climate surveys to understand what they're feeling from the top down.
Which is great.
Yeah, and that report comes back to you, because what you think of a business owner, hey, everybody loves me, everybody's happy, everybody's going great. But then once you really go start asking people,
right, exactly,
it could completely change. I was talking to a young lady the other day. She is in a recruiting company. She was telling me she had a friend that was about to leave. She was going to give a no call, no show leave, walk out.
Wow.
And because her husband got a job in another state, and because she was having difficulties with her manager.
Okay.
And he wouldn't allow her to work remote, but she was one of their top producers. And so he went to this conference, and someone told, when was the last time you talked to your people and asked them how they felt? And the guy was like, I don't think I ever have. So that day he went to go talk to her. She broke down in tears because she said, no one was going to ask me anything about how I felt about this company. From that, they just worked something out to be remote. And he was scared it was going to not work, but it ended up working. And so he got to keep one of his best employees just by having a conversation.
And that's what just talking to, and that's where you guys come in to make them do that type of evaluation. I think business owners are so used to working in our business, and we do as well as, but we need to work on the business. And I'm talking about people. I know we have clients that have 50 employees because, they say, well, you're not really a business owner till you have employees. I know some that have employees and they still working in their business, because you have to understand that professional service is there and you're going to need it. They're going to know exactly what to do. And that's why I was saying, when our clients that we talk to, and we have fund millions of dollars with different types of clients in different industry. Okay. But we notice as you get bigger and at 3 and 4 and 5 and employees growing, you can't do the same thing you did when you had that one employee or it was you wearing all those different hats.
Yeah.
You just can't. So you have to have that in place. And this is something I think is an insider I want to give everyone to be aware of. When the banks and the lenders ask for documents like PLs and balance sheets and cash flow and projections, you all have to understand that tells a story. And I think what you think is, oh, they just asking something just that. No, it tells a story about you. They don't have to come to your place. They can actually see, well, your income dropped last year and, your income dropped this year, but 2 years ago you made this. What happened? And they also look at, you had so many employees and you said you want to get employees, but then we're looking at your employees as a drop from month to month when you showed us your financials. So now you have a story that you're telling that you haven't opened your mouth to. But if you have the human resource services, or like I said, you as a performance advisor, because that's what you do. You come into the company and look at it. And that's why we wanted him on our show, so you all can realize it's important to have this type of service as part of your business. If you're going to grow and you want to make millions, and you have a product that is already making millions, we have a lot of people already making millions, you need to have this type of services, because if not, just like what you're saying, it's going to cost that bottom line. So let me ask you this. When someone is looking at getting this type of service, as a business owner, what do we look for? When I want to actually hire someone for you, give an idea, somebody's in California, they need somebody. Of course, we need them to call us so they can get you, but just in case they don't, what should they look for in HR services and performance?
Lots of things. One, if you have a revolving door, that's the first thing. Hey, why are my employees not sticking around? They're using me as a jumping point to go into the next company or something along those lines.
Wow.
2, they're in high growth mode. There are so many things going to happen. Like you were saying before, when they're like 4 or 5, maybe the company, everybody there has the same last name, and so HR wasn't that important, right? But as they grow,
that's a way to say it.
I mean, it happens a lot. These small companies start with the same family,
Right.
with the same last name, and then they grow to like 20, 30, like,
I like
oh,
that.
wow, we have
I like
employees.
that.
What do I do? And there's no structure in place, and they have, they just started piecemealing.
Right.
And what happens is then things start getting a little corrosive, right? It goes back to that culture of default, and things fall apart. And when you're not seeing the profitability you want, that's another time to look at HR. If you're not happy with your profitability, you need to talk to someone about HR. Period.
Wow.
And then right now, like the things that I see are, like you said, when we were talking about earlier, the remote workforce. How do we keep my employees engaged when they're like 12 different states? How do I communicate properly with them? How do I maximize my ability? The great thing about a remote workforce now is that instead of having a pool of people just in your local community, now you have the entire country.
Right.
Exactly. And so now you have a plethora of finding the best talent. But if you're not being able to hire the talent you want, then again, that's when you got to look at HR, because you got all these people across the country now.
Right.
And you see the unemployment. It's going to get tight here in a little bit. And the way the economy is going, we're going to see probably a little shift in the market as far as, hey, now it's going to be a very I got to be really careful of keeping my employees and finding the talent, because that pool is going to get real small pretty quick.
Well, let me ask you this. So can you all help them? Do you work with them for projecting what the economy is going to look like? So when they get to hiring, you all kind of give them the numbers of what they need to be looking for hiring people in their companies. Do you help with them along that part?
Certain aspects of that, sure. Based upon I won't get into the specifics of how my company handles it, but I'll give you the kind of high level.
Okay.
But understanding the financials from a company, what their goals are, because the HR person, again, is not there just to do payroll and that. It's to be strategic, like the CFO and the CEO, to understand, okay, so here are our projections. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. And then how many people do we need to put in seats? And can this one person take the workload of all this? What is their output? I mean, you don't want a person overworked because they're going to get disengaged real quick. You burn somebody out, they're gone, right? They're going to find another company where they can get paid exactly the same, doing less.
And that's true. I've seen that happen.
I see a lot of folks where, we laid off 10 people. So, hey, James, you're going to have to take the load of this other 2 people, but he's not getting paid anymore. But ABC company over here is going to say, hey, come work for me. You can do what you were doing before. You don't have to do that extra workload for $30,000 more.
Right.
So then you got to look at that. So now you're putting yourself in a very competitive market for losing your employees. So, I mean, there's so many, like I said, I could talk hours about this.
Right.
Because the facets of this are incredible. And before I even started with the company I'm with, I really didn't understand HR. I mean, I thought it was the call center.
Most of us don't.
Yeah,
most of us don't.
Until you dig into it, you don't know what you don't know. And then, as I told you, I had a job I left because of a lot of different things HR-wise. And once I applied my knowledge now to that, I go, oh, yeah.
That could have
clear
been
cut
done for that.
Yeah, I mean, to lose an award-winning employee who's been extremely successful in his career, and then all of a sudden he's leaving the company because the performance wasn't there. Yeah, I was disengaged.
Right.
You don't want those. You don't want your customers talking to disengaged employees.
Exactly.
Imagine that.
Oh,
Take
man.
your worst employee who you know is trying to look for another job. You don't want that. So, you got to be careful with talking to your employees and understand, there is a feeling aspect of it. I mean, human resources has an emotional side. Like recently when we got off of the pandemic, you had a split workforce. You had some people in the office, some people on Zoom. So I heard this a ton, and our thought leadership director for our company said this to me, and it made perfect sense. He said, John, you ever notice when you're on a Zoom call or you're in person, the leadership there goes, so great to see people in the office again. So great to see their faces, but never once acknowledges the people on Zoom.
Wow.
Think about the perception that gives to people.
Exactly.
Am I not important? Am I going to miss that job promotion because I'm on Zoom and I'm not in person? So you have to start thinking about small things like that and how to really engage them. You don't want to disconnect people. And if you're going to have bring people in and have them all like working in the office, you gotta build a culture of that. So on your job descriptions, hey, we're a company that is tight, family-like, and we're very collaborative. We want to be able to speak with each other in an instance in person. So once you give that up front, okay, people are going to come work for it. If they believe in that, they're going to come work for that. But if you don't put that in there, and that's kind of the expectations that, hey, I can work remote, but then all of a sudden it's like, nope, you got to be in the office. Well, think about that person. They're not going to be engaged anymore. So that's the part of the turnover part. And I could go on and on and on and keep going on tangents here, but it's crucial that people pay attention to all this. And if you're not going to hire an HR person, look for a third-party company that does it. There's tons of them out there.
Well, let me ask you that. On that note, how many employees should I have before I have the HR person? HR person let you tell I should have it when I have the first one, shouldn't I? Yeah, I figured you'd say that. So then what about, when should I look at having a third party compared to my HR person? How many employees you recommend? What you think?
Well, it really depends on the situation of the company.
Okay.
For example, I deal with companies that they might have 2 or 3 HR people, and then they still use a third party outsourced. Because remember, there's a lot of those tasks I was talking about, the payroll piece, the administration part of it, and all that.
Okay.
Well, that takes the time away from the HR people to do that strategic piece. So it has to do with workload. Like how much workload is there? For a 10-person, 15-person engineering company, they're not really a huge HR type company.
Right.
They're pretty happy where they're at and all that. But there's small pieces that they still need to do, compliance-wise, handbooks and policies and, benefits come up and all these little small things. So they may not need an HR person, but a third-party HR service would be great.
Right. Okay.
Now, a company that's a little larger that gets calls all the time, they have a complicated payroll, and that they have a high growth mode, and there's lots of different pulling parts to their business and lots of different divisions. Oh, yeah, you want an HR person in place because you need that strategic mindset in place. Third-party HR folks can only do so much. I mean, they're only integrated so much to a company because they're not sitting down every day with the CFO and the CEO and understanding.
So we need to make sure you have your HR person or people to actually work with the third party as well to help the company develop.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
a combination. I see a combination usually working out the best.
Okay.
Because it takes off the workload. Another example, I have a customer of mine that before they worked with us, they had 4 HR people. One was kind of the head of HR, and they were trying to do that strategic piece. Okay. But they have another person, the full time doing payroll the whole day, every day, just payroll. Well, that person was getting paid $80,000 just to do payroll.
Wow.
And then you have another person that their whole entire thing was on the compliance piece because they had 20 employees here. They were in like 18 different states. And all she did was focus on that piece. And then you had one other person that was kind of more of an assistant to the HR, didn't have a certification, but their whole thing was doing some of the administrative tasks, making like, hey, if someone had a problem with their login or whatever that is, that was their job. Okay. So you have about, $150,000, $200,000 worth of salary, right? More than that probably. That could probably be reduced. Now, we're not trying to replace those folks. Right. What we're trying to do is get those people reallocated into a different part of their business. So that way they can work all in the business versus in the business.
Exactly.
You don't need a person doing payroll all day long.
Well, see, and that makes a lot of sense. We don't realize that. I mean, just you bringing that out even to my attention, because I work with a lot of companies in business development as well. Our main thing is loan broker, but my background is business development. And that's something I know owners do not look at, that you have a person working this, like I say, they've been there when your last names was the same. And so now you have grown so big to the point that you actually probably would need someone else to come in, and you can utilize those people in a better, maybe a sales position or something else, like you said, and let you all handle that. So I don't think they think of that. It's like, once we start this way, we're going to keep this way for years. But you're basically saying you got to open up to have, somebody professionally to come in to help your company growing. Because I think, and you tell me what you think, I don't think you can grow as well without some type of service like what you guys have.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I tell the folks I talk to all the time, you can grow perfectly fine without me. I mean, you can grow. I mean, I have no doubt you will, because you have a successful product.
We're not saying you won't, right?
But how fast do you want to get there?
Exactly.
You want to get there faster? I mean, you want to wait? You want to look at a 10-year outlook or a 5-year outlook to get where you want to go?
Exactly.
And that could be everything. Again, it goes back to the profitability. Are you happy with the profitability of your 10-year outlook? Okay. If the answer is yes, then you don't need me. Okay. You don't need an HR service. If you're super happy with that, and I mean, I'm a big believer, ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
But if you go, you know what, we probably could be a little bit more profitable. That bottom line, that revenue could be a little higher. The bottom line could be a little bit lower. Then yeah, you probably want to talk to somebody. And that's simple it is. I mean, the equation is, if you want to change your success equation, is look at, are you happy with your profitability? Because it affects everything. Whether
you got to do that check. You're correct.
And for your piece, that's how people look at it. I mean, how profitable is this company? How
are you going to be here 5 years from now? I mean, we doing a loan for 10 years, and you want to make sure you're going to be there. That's why they do on line of credit. They do a yearly annual check. You just don't get that line of credit and they leave you alone. They want to see everything every year. So that is important. They know that. It's just, I think that's the reason why we had this podcast, because as business owners, a lot of us, we don't know that. Sure. And so what you're saying is what we need to go after. So like we did tell you, we have a bank, you have a banker, you have an attorney, you have a CPA. So you need to have a business development, but you should have HR services.
Something. You got to have something.
Yes. And so I think that's something we're just not aware that we need, but it all affects the bottom line, which is revenue. And it also affects you for us getting equity partners, because you said equity partners look at it a lot different than lenders do. Sure. They look at it a little bit more stringent, I think, right? You think on the equity side?
From an equity point of view, that P&L line from for the employment part is pretty big. Right? That fringe cost, the cost after salary. Mm-hmm. They don't want to see a high fringe cost. So a lot of folks don't do due diligence. You got to it frustrates me so much when I talk to a business like, oh, we're good where we're at. You're not going to do any due diligence. I mean,
you're not going to check into it?
I mean, it's like, okay, if your mortgage rate is like 7% on your house, and then all of a sudden interest rates drop to like 2.3%, are you really not going to do some due diligence?
I don't want to go that low. No, I like spending a lot of money now.
I love spending more money than I know, and I'm getting less service out of it, right?
Right.
It's like when everybody cut the cord off cable and went to all streaming streams. They they do some due diligence. You know what makes more sense to do all this and get cheaper, and I get more out of it with my dollar.
Especially when I don't watch everything that's on cable. That's what people say. I only watch one show, so that's why they went with that.
I don't know. I was paying like $300 for Dish for like a bunch of little boxes and show TVs I didn't watch. Where I could just switch to like Hulu TV and saving.
Right. Now, if you're the type of person to watch every show that's on cable, a lot of people do.
Well, then you're not making money then. You're not out there doing it. You're not,
you say whatever they do.
Yeah, if you're watching that much TV, you're not out there making money. So they're not listening to this right now.
Right. Okay, they're not the same people. But anyway, if you watch a lot of television, we can see you justifying having the cable.
Yeah, sure.
Or you say, yeah, right. He's not making no money.
No, they're not making any money.
So that is great. So we want to definitely thank you today. I mean, this has been really good. It's very enlightening. I want our listeners to know you can contact us at the podcast at TDJ Equity Funding Insiders.net. If you all want to reach out to John and have him to get with you guys, definitely contact us and we can make that happen. As well as if you have any questions or comments about the show that you want to get, send those to us. When you download, we definitely want you to listen and rate us as well. Again, as loan brokers, we're actually trying to help you learn the insights of getting funding for your business. And we're talking about thousands, millions of dollars, not just, 10,000, 20,000. They are doing it. We are doing it. It is out here. But we have to be, as a business and a real estate investor, you have to be prepared to take in those funds. Okay. So we want to thank you all for listening to us today. We look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, you all take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of TDJ Equity Funding Insiders Podcast. If you'd like to be a guest or get in touch with us, please visit our website at tdjequityllc.net/podcast or email us at podcast@tdjequityfundinginsiders.net. Until next time, take care.